I wanted to be the best nurse I could be.
I was really looking forward to my nursing career.
I could not get over the sense that I was being watched.
Now I'm starting to freak out. I just started to run.
Felt like I was in a horror movie. I was absolutely terrified.
I felt that heavy sense of death. I was never going to come out alive.
Nursing school graduate Tanya Thomas has just landed her first full-time job caring for the terminally ill in a religious hospital.
I was 18 years old when I started doing palliative care. I was very young. I'm very empathetic, so I always wanted to kind of help people along and help to comfort them as they move forward. I really loved what I did. There were nuns that were working there at the time that I was there. You could always tell who they were just by the way they carried themselves. They were very focused on the residents and the families. So on my shift, I would very often be found in the nursing station. And I would be able to catch up on any charting that had to be done. Any of the doctor's orders that had come in for the day, get them processed. Let's get the meds ready for the morning.
Tanya is usually alone on the ward at night. She decides to investigate the strange sounds.
Did I get you?
One of the girls I worked with quite a bit, we used to have a little bit of fun together on nights.
The idea was to scare you.
Well, you did it. You did it.
I got you, girl.
Yeah, you did. I'll get you back.
We would try to kind of get each other going or freak each other out, so to say.
Tanya goes back to work, hoping there won't be any more interruptions.
And I suddenly heard the elevator move. When we were working night shift, the service elevator was very rarely used. There was no nursing staff that was coming up and down. There was no dietary or laundry staff that were using it, so typically it was quiet back there.
Hello?
I thought it was strange. When I would sit at the nurse's station at night, I wasn't able to see the service elevator. And I stood up to go and see who it was that was actually there.
Tanya is responsible for the safety of her floor
Hello?
and needs to monitor anything unusual.
It concerned me that maybe somebody could have come in off the street, and at the time that the elevator door opened, I'm not paying attention, and somebody that shouldn't be on the ward may have been on the ward.
Someone out there?
The elevator door shut, but there was no one. And I just literally went back and sat back in my chair again and thought, well, that was very, very strange, and I'm sure that won't happen again. I started to notice a repetition to what was happening. I had my watch, so I would glance down and think, okay, is it gonna happen on the 12:30 mark? Is it gonna do it again? And I started to, at that point, try to figure out what might be going on, so I made a call to security.
Is someone playing with the elevator downstairs?
They seemed quite as surprised as me, actually.
Tanya tries to dismiss the episode, but then it happens again, night after night.
So the elevator door would start to open every half hour. Whenever I would glance down and I would hear it open, I was again looking at the clock. It was literally right on time, and it was starting to get a little bit
Hello?
uncomfortable at that point. It was almost like it was on a cycle. My immediate thought, okay, what's going on and why does this keep happening? There was no way to explain it at all.
Even more alarming,
Hello?
Tanya begins to feel that she's not alone.
Someone out there?
I could not get over the sense that I was being watched. I would have the sense that there was an energy or something that was standing directly in front of me. That I wasn't able to actually see. But I just had the sense I was being looked at. It's a very creepy feeling when something like that happens, especially if you can't see them.
The incident is deeply unsettling, but Tanya turns her focus back to the care of her patients.
I couldn't be running around, trying to figure out what was making everything tick in the building. Always had to keep focused on what it was that I was doing in terms of my work.
A poltergeist is known as a noisy ghost. This is a ghost that is traditionally a lot more physically active. When you have a poltergeist in your residence, you usually have a lot of physical things moving, a lot of sounds, a lot of disruption.
And I thought, this time I'm just gonna listen.
But what she hears only fuels her apprehension.
And I became aware of a footstep that actually did come off of the elevator itself into the hallway. I was actually afraid to get up and look at that point. I felt completely overwhelmed at that point.
But her fear turns to relief. Something she can't share.
You didn't talk about the paranormal stuff with the nun supervisor. She was a lovely lady. This institution was predominantly Catholic, of course. And we just didn't discuss things like that. Things like that didn't happen. So I just thought that everything would go back to normal after that, but I couldn't have been more wrong. I was going down the hallway to do some medications with the patients. And I noticed somebody sitting at the very end of the hall in a little armchair, staring down the hallway at me. It was the middle of the night, everybody was asleep. I thought, well, that's strange that there's somebody sitting out there.
Tanya is sure of one thing. The mysterious stranger isn't one of her patients.
He wasn't very old at all. He wasn't what I would expect to see in a nursing home. All I could think was, is it somebody that's come up to visit? Did they come up the back stairwell?
Tanya tries to push down a growing sense of panic.
Why are you here?
Wanted to try to ascertain where he had come from. I really felt like he didn't belong here. I think that scared me more than anything.
Nurse Tanya Thomas is shaken by a series of bizarre events at the hospital where she works.
I started to notice that there was the strangest light, a shimmer, that was coming away from him. And it was then that I thought, okay, this definitely isn't fitting. What should be going on here? It's a little bit like looking at sunlight on the roof of a car. I was looking around the hallway for any evidence of any light that might be actually casting that or creating that. And it wasn't being created by anything outside of himself. He was creating it himself. He was still staring towards me, but literally looking right through me. At that point, I stopped dead right in the middle of the hallway and called out to him.
Who are you?
I mean, he wouldn't say anything to me. He just wouldn't say a word to me. He just stared at me, and that freaked me out.
Hospitals can hold such a mix of different types of energies that you have almost a mixed soup of paranormal events there.
I started to wonder if maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me at one point. I started to think, oh my goodness, it's 4 o'clock in the morning, you just need a coffee, what's wrong with you?
The first rational response anybody would have would be to write this off as being psychological. Hey, I'm finding myself alone in the middle of a dark hallway. I'm really isolated. And so, when I feel the presence of somebody else in there with me, is my mind playing tricks?
Tanya goes back to her rounds, but what she sees next stuns her. Not only is the mysterious figure back, he's talking to an older patient.
He was talking to one of our patients. The male patient was having quite the conversation at the end of the hallway. Just felt that it was odd that the male patient was so comfortable talking to this young fellow, almost like he knew who he was. And when I approached, the male patient turned and looked at me, and I said to him, "Who are you talking to?" And he looked back at me and he said, "Oh, just my friend right here." And that's all he said. He just literally walked back into his bedroom and got back into bed. It was just this point that I thought, okay, I'm supposed to be here to take care of people, and all I want to do is turn around and run, go lock myself in the nursing station.
But her patient's encounter takes a terrifying turn.
So the male resident that was actually talking to the fella in the hallway passed away.
Tanya can't help but believe she's witnessed something supernatural.
I freaked out. My first thought was, oh my God.
Tanya is deeply shaken by the experience, but must report the death of her patient.
The procedure when someone passes away is to inform the doctor. And then you make arrangements with the funeral home to come and pick up the body. And there was a family that were coming in to visit. It was a mom with a daughter. She was about 5 years old, this little girl. They were unaware of the fact that he had already passed over.
I need someone down there.
As Tanya speaks to the coroner, the girl heads to her grandfather's room.
And the last thing I wanted to do was for her to see the body lying in the room. And I was on the telephone, and I glanced up. This figure moved through the doorway. I almost dropped the phone. It shocked me so much. And this tall person is standing there in front of this tiny little girl. And this little girl is looking up at him. And he is gazing down towards her. That little girl had seen him. She seemed to be aware of something that I was aware of, but nobody else in that space was aware of it at that time. So it was only two of us that were seeing what we were seeing. And I said, I'm trying to just make sure you don't walk in there because your grandfather has passed away. And she turned to me and she looked at me and she said, I know, she just told me, and she indicated the 5-year-old. I was blown away. I was absolutely blown away. I got chills that went from my toes all the way up to the top of my head.
Tanya is left trying to make sense of what happened.
I felt for sure that this entity was the grandfather that had just passed away in that room. You don't expect to see that kind of stuff when you're working.
People see manifestations of ghosts in many different ways. Sometimes they look like a person standing right in front of you. An act of haunting would be having a conscious spirit that's present there, that's able to identify the living, that's able to communicate with the living.
Tanya's fear at work intensifies, and even the most mundane tasks take on a feeling of terror.
We would fill bags on the floor, every single shift, and the only way to get it down into the laundry room was to push it down the chute. The laundry chute room is at the very end of the hallway. I was never comfortable with that room. Never, ever liked that room.
Tanya can't understand why the door is padlocked.
Always wondered about that, and I thought, like, why would you put that on there? There's a lock on the door already. So it didn't make an ounce of sense to me that that padlock would be there. Never figured it out. I felt heavy. I felt every time I got near that door, I had an unexplainable feeling that I just could not put into words. And I kept thinking to myself, stop being so ridiculous, you're being silly.
Knowing there's an option to get help, Tanya is unwilling to enter the laundry room alone.
We would typically go in pairs to do that, especially with me, because I didn't like going there on my own. Every time I got near that door, I just didn't feel safe. I just wanted to get out of there. It was like, let's get it done, let's get out. It was like a little broom closet, maybe 8 feet long. And as you push the door open, there's the laundry chute. And it was a big thing with a handle that you would pull open. And I kept thinking to myself, there's no reason for you to have a fear of this little room. And I thought, am I claustrophobic? I just got the weirdest feeling come over me. And I turned back to look at her. Her eyes are as big as saucers. In that moment, I just feel a sense of death.
Nurse Tanya Thomas is terrified by escalating paranormal events on her hospital ward.
It was looking a good 4 or 5 feet above my head, and all I could think was, oh my God, what's there? And then all of a sudden, I heard her scream. Because at that point, my heart just jumped right into my throat.
Oh my God! Oh my God, what was that? What was that?
I had an immediate panic sensation because I felt like death was following me. And it scared me. At that point, she said something came right up over top of you. That it was absolutely awful.
You're right.
She was absolutely terrified. It probably took us a good half hour to calm her down at the nurse's station. She was literally shaking from head to foot.
The shared paranormal event is too much for Tanya. She decides to look into the hospital's past for answers.
I came to discover there was a story about a security guard that was making his rounds every night using the back elevator. It was such an aha moment for me immediately. I thought right to the time, every half hour.
She learns the laundry room is connected to a sinister event in the past.
I learned that one of the residents had actually gotten into that room somehow, had managed to squeeze herself into that laundry chute, and they found her body the next morning underneath of a pile of laundry, which explained now why they had locks on the laundry chutes. There was suspicion among the staff that there was foul play.
It's very possible that the entity that Tanya encountered was a part of the original act that was committed there. A very traumatic death may have happened in this area. That could be the person who actually did the act, but this could also be an after effect of the event where you have an energy that's left there and is now attracting something else that's negative to come to that area.
Started to give me a little bit more insight into why certain things might be happening in the building itself. When somebody dies like that, it's just natural. They're gonna hang around. They're gonna try and work out why they came to such a terrible end.
Troubled and exhausted by what she's seen, Tanya decides to leave her job.
I was starting to feel that there was always something that was going to be going on. Didn't matter what shift I was on at that point. Could be working days, afternoons, or nights. But I came to kind of expect that things were going to be happening.
CJ Smith is a janitor in the MRI center of a large metropolitan hospital.
What I liked about being a janitor was I worked alone most of the time. There wasn't always a supervisor there. I was able to take care of my business and then go home. I have 2 kids and we're very busy all of the time, so the more time that I have free, the better.
For CJ, the quiet nights are a welcome contrast to his previous life.
I served as an 11 Bravo infantry, and I went to Kandahar. When I was in the Army, I was in several firefights overseas. I've seen it all. This job meant pretty much everything to me. My shift was usually about until 1 a.m. I would work my way from one side of the hallway to the other, just changing trash, wiping tables. The area was fairly small. It would only take about 3 hours to clean each night.
CJ requires a security pass to get inside the MRI center.
There were electronic doors on either side of the hallway. They were there for security. Every day I had to go through the doors to get to my actual cleaning site. There was one night when I was cleaning in the hallway. And I heard some noise behind me, which was odd because I'm the only person there. And when I looked back, one of the doors was open. It's just very odd because they only work if you have an electronic card. The first time that I had ever seen one of the doors open by themselves, I assumed that somebody was there. And I walked down to see if somebody was there because it is a hospital and people are in and out all crazy times, but there was nobody out there.
CJ is so disturbed by the incident, he reports it.
I actually talked to one of my supervisors about it, and he told us that it wasn't necessarily our problem. We were just there to be cleaning.
It's an old hospital.
He did not see it as a security issue. It makes me nervous. I feel goosebumps a little bit on my arms.
CJ has no choice but to wonder who or what is controlling the doors.
I instantly felt threatened.
Army vet and hospital janitor CJ Smith is experiencing increasingly strange events at work.
And then the doors open at the same time. There was nothing that we could find in that hospital to cause this to happen. I just tried to ignore it. My job was very important. I mean, I have a family, and so I have to support them by any means necessary.
CJ tries to put the incident behind him.
I was putting all of my supplies away in the janitor's closet. When I smelled something. is very strong, pungent, fermented smell almost. I know the smells of the hospital, and they didn't come from there. I turned around and looked for it. All the trash cans, all of the desks. Figured someone had left food out. Could never find it. I used a lot of bleach, but nothing ever worked.
To CJ, it feels like some kind of warning.
The idea that spirits can produce scent is something that we've found in multiple cases and from different paranormal experiences. The smells tend to be things that the human brain has actually been hardwired to dislike. For example, feces, rotting meat, sulfur, all things that in the wild we would definitely have to avoid. Those smells seem to be emitted when they want people to go away, when they're trying to tell people to back off.
Things take a turn for the worse when CJ gets a call he's been dreading.
I was at home when I heard my grandfather was admitted to the same hospital where I worked.
On his next shift, CJ makes sure to visit his grandfather.
He had battled cancer for almost 20 years. He had all kinds of heart problems, a pacemaker put in. We just thought it was another one of the hiccups that he would get over. Me and my grandfather were very close. The only thing that he told me about his own death is he was not ready to die. When my grandfather passed away, it was just before 11 p.m. Of course, we were very sad. It was a very hard thing. Two weeks after my grandfather had passed, I was cleaning and I had seen something kind of dart across the doorway, just as if someone was walking by the doorway, and that's what I thought. I called out, hey, to see if anybody was there, and I received no reply. So I just went back cleaning.
CJ wonders if the shadow figure might have something to do with his grandfather. But he dismisses the idea.
I feel that he would have known better, because honestly, I was scared most of the time.
Whoever or whatever it is isn't going away.
I could see that something was standing just with its head like around the corner to where I could barely see it. The first thing I thought of it was a person casting a shadow. And when I look up, they kind of dart away. I had seen the other shadow figures and heard the noises and seen the doors, and I played it all off in my head. I didn't want to be there, but I had to keep my job.
CJ's feeling of dread soon slips into terror.
When I actually started to notice these things, every night it was a struggle to go there. I didn't want to be there. I see these things, and it was pretty scary.
Shadow figures have been always steeped in the paranormal world in both parapsychology and paranormal lore. They've been encountered in multiple cultures all over the world, and they don't really have a direct explanation.
CJ's main concern is keeping his family safe.
What if this is something that isn't nice. And it, you know, did follow me home or is just hiding out. I get paranoid for my kids a lot, especially, you know, in the nighttime. I felt, you know, very threatened. I never felt like that with anything else that I've ever seen or experienced.
CJ's family is completely safe, but back at work, he can't shake the feeling that he's being followed.
I was actually finished cleaning that night, and I was putting all of my things away into a janitor's closet. I was standing in the inside, and I wasn't able to see the hallway. And I smelled the smell. I did start to get goosebumps. Like the hair on the back of my neck would stand up, and then when I turned around, it was just standing there. I felt like I was in a horror movie. Just thought it was gonna get me. I was absolutely terrified.
Hospital janitor CJ Smith is terrorized by paranormal events he is forced to confront.
The best way I could describe it, it wasn't proportionate, I guess, for a human. You could see very obviously the head and then arms, but it seemed to just fade out. There were no hands or feet. There were no visible eyes. There was just empty spaces. But it seemed like it was looking directly at me. My heart was going 100 miles an hour at this time. I wasn't sure, you know, what this could be. I was so scared. I mean, I've never felt like that in my entire life. I ran outside, and I didn't look behind me until I got to my car because I was afraid that it was gonna be right there behind me.
Whenever I get a client that comes to me with instances where they're seeing an apparition like this, my first reaction is for them to be cautious. They've got a situation where the entity is telling them to back off and get away, and usually that should be respected.
The next day was the absolute worst. I had talked to my wife, and we decided, you know, that it would be best if I could try to change jobs. In the beginning, I wanted to believe that it had something to do with my grandfather after he had passed, but I don't believe that was him. He would have found a better way to approach the situation. But I always believed in the paranormal because I always believed there was something else out there after life. I was a believer before, and now I'm like a much stronger believer.
Nurse Susan Carter arrives for her shift on the palliative care ward, hoping she can bring some much-needed Christmas cheer.
Hey,
Oh, hi. How are you?
I went into nursing because I just felt that that would be a good fit for me to give that love and tenderness that everybody deserves at that time, you know, nearing the end of their life.
I was just gonna...
Before she heads out onto the ward, Susan gets an update from the duty nurse on her cases, and one in particular.
This patient came into the hospital about a week and a half before Christmas.
No, the thing is, though,
He reminds Susan of her father.
the thing is, though, is that you...
My father died when I was 14 from a massive coronary. He was only 51.
The problem is breakfast. This is the problem.
This patient was dying. He came into hospital, frankly, to spend the last days of his life. And I was surprised how well we actually interacted.
Susan sees her patient often over the coming days.
The bond that we created meant something to me. I had a few days off on my schedule just before Christmas, and I was supposed to return to work on the midnight shift Christmas Day. And I was thinking, how am I supposed to say to him in the morning, Merry Christmas, when this is his last Christmas on Earth? So I decided I'm going to buy him a present. And what do you get somebody that is going to pass relatively soon? I decided that I'm going to buy him aftershave. I did know that he enjoyed the orderly shaving him, splashing his face with aftershave, so that's what I did. And I was at the store and I was holding the bottle in my hand, looking down at it, when suddenly I became extremely weepy, very sad. And for a moment I thought, like, am I sad because I'm missing my father? But then the thought of this patient came through to me. And I thought, no, I'm sad for this man. He's such a nice man.
But Susan's inexplicable grief turns to something more sinister.
I really started to get very scared. But I collected myself and went about with my day.
After a few days off, Susan returns to the hospital.
Hello.
When I went into work, it was Christmas Eve.
Oh, who's the present for?
I showed up with my bottle of aftershave, my present for my patient.
The duty nurse has bad news about Susan's favorite patient.
She said, oh, he died. I just was flabbergasted at that moment. I just felt like the floor had been pulled from underneath me. And I asked, what time did he die? And she said he started to fail at about 10:30 and he died at close to 11 o'clock. And that was the time that I was purchasing the aftershave and became very weepy. And it was very spooky, actually. Now I'm starting to freak out a bit.
Strange experiences at work have left nurse Susan Carter feeling haunted and overwhelmed and struggling to make sense of what has happened.
When you get around holidays, it's a very highly emotionally charged time of the year, throwing a lot of energy into the environment, and that might make it possible for a spirit to manifest.
I really felt that he came to say goodbye to me and to say, I know that you're getting me a Christmas present.
Susan collects herself and begins her Christmas Eve shift.
It was very spooky this night because it was extremely bitter outside, and the windows of the hospital were old, and you could actually hear the wind howling. Just even knowing that this man passed sort of set me in sort of a little bit of a fearful mode. The hallway itself was very long and very dark.
Why is it so dark in the hallways?
It's dark in the hallways because the people are sleeping.
Then Susan notices something that sets her on edge.
I saw this light on. This is an empty room. The light shouldn't be on. So I decided I'm going to turn off the light. At that moment, I swear I saw my patient walking down the hallway. I never ever felt fearful of ghosts or anything like that. But the mere fact that he has passed and I know he died, I thought, okay, this is really getting to me. I started really to get very fearful. And I looked, and I saw him standing at the end of the hallway. He had a suit on. I'd never seen him in a suit. He was always in a hospital gown. And then he disappeared. My heart was pounding. I was so stunned, I backed up. I didn't want to turn my back on anything that I was seeing ahead of me. And when I came into the doorway, the door started to close on me. And the door almost literally hit me in the face. I had to go back like this.
Terrified, Susan struggles to regain her composure.
I decided I needed to say my goodbye to him.
Are you there?
And I said that you meant something to me, that I was honored to be your nurse, that I'm sorry that he had to suffer, and that I won't ever forget you.
When Susan's calling out to give some final farewells to one of the patients in the hospital, it's very possible that that patient heard her calling and came forward.
The mere fact that he has died and now he's presenting himself to me, it was very, very terrifying. And then he disappeared again. And now I'm thinking, oh my God, where is he? And I turned my head, and he was right there. At that moment, I just felt like this rush of adrenaline coming through me. And that's it. I just turned and I started to run. I finally got to the nurse's station and she just stood up and said, Susan, like, what's wrong with you? Did you see a ghost? And I said, I think I did.
What? I think I saw.
It terrified me.
It's okay, calm down. I don't think so. I don't see it.
Although Susan was taken off guard and may have been terrified by this experience, it doesn't mean that this entity had any kind of physical harm or ill intention towards Susan.
I know that this patient would not mean me any harm at all, but I think I surprised him perhaps with my reaction because I was terrified when I saw him.
Though Susan continues to work in nursing, something has shifted inside her.
This experience changed me. I became more open to the idea that there is a paranormal world out there, that there is something more beyond what we see. I truly believe that he came to me at that time because I was sad for him and I needed closure. I needed to say goodbye to him and let him know how much he meant to me, and by him coming forward, that allowed that to happen. And I think that's why so many spirits come forward to other people. To always give people an opportunity to say goodbye and have their peace.